Hi everyone, this is Daniel Gregg speaking, and we're going to have our next video on the Genesis Interlinear. Alright, so last time I discussed the first three words in Genesis, and I have today a bullet point list here of items to go down, and we're going to review some, and then we're going to discuss some of the next part of the text. Alright, so I've tried to organize this as well as I can, so it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so, and we're going to cover some additional features and go on to some new words. Alright, so here's the text up on the screen that I discussed last time with some slight modification. Alright, so I spoke of the ambiguity of the infinitive construct word baro, creating. Alright, so now I want to explain what an infinitive is for those of you who may not have learned it in secondary school. An infinitive is a word like, in English, an infinitive is like a word like go, a verb, in its simplest form. Go, walk, come, swim. Okay, and you can tell a word is an infinitive in English because you can put the word to in front of it. To go, to walk, to swim. It's the simplest form of the verb without any endings or conjugations on it. All right, so in Hebrew there are two kinds of infinitive. There's an infinitive construct and an infinitive absolute. All right, so the infinitive, the construct, the word construct in the infinitive construct means that we can add suffixes and prefixes to the verb. The infinitive absolute is a standalone word with a singular meaning. We don't add prefixes and suffixes to it. All right, so in the case of baro, the infinitive absolute form is baro with a comets under the first vowel, and the infinitive construct form is baro with a schwa under the first consonant. All right, so the infinitive absolute has a it describes action, the verbal action in progression, creating. All right, and the infinitive construct is without the ing, create, if it's a verb, or if it's being used as a noun, it will take the ing form, creating. Okay, so that depends on how it's constructed in the sentence. So the word constructed has to do with the way the word is used. That's why we call it construct. All right, so just as an aside here, if you're learning a vocabulary list of words in Hebrew, usually in the schools and seminaries, they teach you to learn the perfect form of the verb in the third person masculine singular. And in this case, that would be the word bara. And then they'll put down create. This form of the verb actually means, however, he has created. Okay, so it's perfect tense. So it's not really the simplest form of the verb. Some dictionaries will only list the root, but usually they list it in the form of the perfect third person masculine singular. But actually, the fundamental building block of Hebrew originates from the infinitive absolute. And so that would be bara, and then, or no, that's all right, that would be baro, and then from there, we can get to the infinitive construct by reducing the comets under the first vowel to a schwa. So that would be baro. Okay, so you can do that with most any verb in the Hebrew language in the call. Okay, so I've thought about creating a dictionary, but that's a different project, and I would, if I did that, I would classify the verbs according to the infinitive absolute, and then I would give the infinitive construct form after that. It's all very paradigmatic. It follows a paradigm. All right. So the reason we need to know what this is how we need to know is the grammatical term infinitive construct refers to the word baro, and its meaning, as I have put in the text, is creating. All right. So in the last lesson, I spoke of the ambiguity of the infinitive construct word barreau, creating, and have introduced a new symbol to the English text, the plus sign below the word by. So this is one of the changes since the last video. Okay, and a new symbol to the Hebrew text, the angled bracket at the end of the word barreau. Okay, so these signs more or less indicate the same thing, but I'll get to explaining what they mean. Okay, so also I think I did not explain the tilde symbol used at the end of the word beginning. If you look at the G, there's a tilde on it. Okay, this symbol marks the feminine gender of the word beginning in the English text, since gender is not a regular part of English. Okay, so I can bypass the grammar terms in English in describing the translation for most of the time, except we can't bypass gender because English doesn't have it. Okay, since gender is not a regular part of English, it is marked in the text with a symbol. So a tav or hey at the end of a noun in Hebrew generally indicates a feminine gender, though there are exceptions. But after a while, you learn the paradigm and can tell most of the time which words are feminine. Okay, definitely a kametz hey at the end of a word is a feminine ending, and a patak tav at the end of a word is a feminine ending. Okay, so the next point here is I have noted the deficiencies in other interlinears. Okay, and those deficiencies are the reason for this project. One of those deficiencies is the use of English grammatical terms for Hebrew features next to the English text, or the attempt to reproduce grammatical terms using English words. For example, in the ESV Interlinear, they try to mark infinitives with the word to before the verb, even though the translation value shouldn't really be expressing the word to. Okay, so that's one of the deficiencies. Grammatical terms are, of course, useful, but they serve as a barrier to learning Hebrew if one thinks of everything in grammatical terms. So, in other words, if you get into the habit of translating Hebrew to grammar and grammar to English, then you're introducing an extra step into understanding the Hebrew. It's better to go directly from the Hebrew to the English, if at all possible, without the interposition of grammatical terms. Therefore, everything being a grammatical commentary on the text is reduced to a symbol in this interlinear, other than our Latinized alphabet. So the Latinized alphabet, A to Z, lower and uppercase, is reserved for the English translation, and we don't have any extra words floating around referring to grammar, or we're not using any of the English words just to represent grammatical functions, so that you could just read the English off and get the sense. This is so that the reader can read the English part and ignore all the symbols. Okay, so if we look at the first three words here, in the beginning of the creating by the Almighties. So we have a perfectly intelligible sentence in English, or what I would call a phrase, okay, that needs completing with the rest of the sentence. But so far it's perfectly intelligible without the use of any grammar terms. And you could easily overlook the tilde, the plus sign, and the multiplication sign, and the italics and the and the lower and the small cap bolding, okay, which all indicate, those features all indicate the grammatical functions, but they can be regarded as transparent to the English reader. They represent properties of the Hebrew words, however. All right. Okay, so they are made as unnoticeable as possible. Okay, so as much as possible, the Hebrew grammar is expressed by the English translation itself, so that one can obtain a direct transfer of Hebrew form to English meaning without explaining the matter with a grammatical term. All right, next point. One can tell from the Hebrew itself what the English should be. The symbols for grammar serve as an answer key. In other words, the goal is to learn to get the meaning out of the Hebrew corresponding to the English. The symbols for the grammar serve as an answer key if the reader has not completely learned the Hebrew paradigm enough to tell what the translated sense should be. All right. Part of the goal of this interlinear is to provide a literalistic yet intelligible English translation simply by reading the English part using the numbers when the order of the English sentence would be different from the Hebrew. So if I were to read off the first verse here to you, reading just the English in the order indicated, it would be, in the beginning of the creating by the Almighties of the heavens and as well the earth, when the earth had been naught and nothing, and darkness be upon the faces of the deep, and the Spirit of the Almighties be causing a fluttering upon the faces of the waters. Then says the Almighty, may it be light. Then it be light. So that's verses 1 through 3, okay? I'm reading just the English text, okay, including all the words that are there, okay. Alrighty, what point was on here? If you compare videos from the last video, because I said this project's still under development, you can see that I eliminated the superscript numbers on the first 3 words. In this case, they have now proved unnecessary since I introduced the plus sign and rendered the word of as by. So instead of the creating of, it's the creating by. Okay, so the text reads, in the beginning of the creating by the Almighties. The plus sign simply means that the literal sense of the word marked by the plus sign, is of. Okay, so the of is still indicated there, but now it's indicated by the plus sign, and the by is a less literal translation of it. Okay. And the of stands for the construct case or genitive case of the word. So I used 2 more grammatical words there, but construct and genitive mean the same thing in Hebrew and Greek grammar, and typically it means a noun followed by the word of. Okay, like my bike would be bike of me more literally, but the word bike would be in a construct form, and the word me would be attached to the end of the construct form of the word. Okay, so that's called genitive in Greek or construct in Hebrew. The English translation by clarifies the sense in English. So I told you it was ambiguous. Okay, with the word of, and the plus sign is a code for the more literal feature of the Hebrew from which the English translation is derived. Okay, so the purpose of this is so that it may be determined scientifically where every feature of the English translation ultimately comes from in the Hebrew language. So I want to show where everything is sourced. Okay, sourced to explain its origin and how it arises. Okay, the purpose of this, okay, well, I already said that. So creating of the Almighty, okay, so if we're more literalistic here. Creating of the Almighty in English may have either a possessive meaning, which is correct, or an objective meaning, i.e. the Almighty's getting created, or getting creating, which of course is incorrect to the context and the nature of the Most High. Okay. The by in the text takes this ambiguity away. I should note, and I think I noted this last time, the possessive sense is the default sense or the norm in Hebrew. It is a sense that is subconsciously tested for first by the mental process of the Hebrew language within the Hebrew mind. Okay, generally the norm-based sense that makes sense is the sense. Okay, or the first norm, following a hierarchy, as I explained before. We are using Hebrew norms. These norms are not English norms. Therefore, we have to translate the Hebrew norm directly with the word by to show the result of the Hebrew thinking process. But again, we must show where the norm comes from and how it is featured in the text. Otherwise, you won't understand the link between the Hebrew and the English, or vice versa, where in the Hebrew the sense is coming from. And I haven't actually gotten there yet, but we will. Generally, okay, so we did that. The angled bracket, okay, now we're going to get there, at the end of baro, indicates the construct or genitive connection of baro with the next word, Elohim. Okay, so you may be aware that Hebrew nouns change their vowels and accent pattern when a construct, meaning connects the noun with the next word. However, this is not always the case. Some words have their absolute form and construct forms the same. So just to describe the difference so you understand what absolute versus construct means. Absolute is a standalone word, okay, without the word of or a connecting preposition between it and a possessive ending, okay, or objective ending. Okay, and the absolute is without it, and the construct allows for it or requires it. Okay, so when this is the case, the sense is construct. Okay, so we have some words in Hebrew that don't change their vowels. However, there's another way that the Hebrew language uses to indicate the relationship, the noun of noun construct relationship. Okay, and that is to put the words in close connection to each other and reduce the accents on the first word. Okay, so it'll be pronounced baro Elohim. Okay, as one, as if it were one word, so to speak. Okay, the phonetic impact, if we may speak of phonetic beyond the sense of letter pronunciation and in the sense of how the sentence will sound, is that the bracket makes one phrase out of baro Elohim. Okay, exactly as if a makef were added in after the word baro. Okay, the makef is that upper hyphen you see in Hebrew text joining many small two-letter words to the next word. Such words joined together are accented as one unit. Therefore, I have lowered the main accent on baro to a medium accent. So that's the hollow diamond you see over the resh. Okay. All right. I have not used the makef to mark words whose construct and absolute forms are the same because the makef would prove ambiguous to indicate the joining of words for this sense. The makef is used for this purpose, yes, but it is also used when the joining is not for this purpose, where the relation between words is indicated by a preposition. Okay. Also, the makef is not employed in numerous cases where it could be to indicate this purpose. And this is the problem with the Masoretic notation. It is not all of one sense, and that makes it impossible for anyone who does not already know Hebrew. Or you can go, just as an aside here, as isn't in the script, but if you follow the 30 or some odd Masoretic accents, sometimes you can, the accents will indicate the construct relationship for you, but that system is too complicated for someone to learn because it's also a cantillation and it's chanting instructions and punctuation instructions along with accent instructions. Okay, so it's all mixed up together. So you more or less have to know Hebrew first before you can disambiguate what accent is being used for which purpose in each case. Not to say the least that some words have two accents on them, and you have to know the rules for which accent actually shows where the accent really is. Okay, two accents that have exactly the same symbol. All right, I should remark at this point there are many features of ancient spoken biblical Hebrew that are not completely indicated by the Masoretic text with the vowel points. All right, so this is a time to pause this video and cut the feed for a bit. All right, let's see where we were at here. Okay. Oh, I was talking about the missing features from Biblical Hebrew. Okay. I should remark at this point that there are many features of ancient spoken Biblical Hebrew that are not completely indicated by even the Masoretic text, with the vowel points and cantillation marks. That is to say, the consonant text obviously lacks the vowels, but having added in the vowels, the text still lacks accent marks. But having added in the accent marks, the text still lacks other phonetic features, which I have not yet told you about. All right, so this is the case with every language to one degree or another in between the spoken word or the spoken language and the written. But the curve of difference is much greater than Hebrew than many other languages, chiefly due to its antiquity. Okay, due to the fact that systems for expressing written language are a technology that developed over time. So when Biblical Hebrew first came about at the origin or the foundation of the world, it was complete, whole spoken language. Okay, but there was no written technology for it. The written technology developed over time, and the language originates at the beginning, but the written technology had to evolve. All right, all of these missing features are for the most part paradigmatic. That is, there is a paradigm or rule that applies to every case of a new word. A good example is the vowel pattern for the Hebrew participle. Okay, so let's take a typical participle like omer, saying. So that's aleph, mem, resh, okay, omer. A holam goes between the first and second root letters of the verb, and a tsere between the second and the third. This is a paradigmatic feature. The paradigm is learned by children who intuit the pattern after hearing the language over their young years, and it gets embedded in their linguistic mental process. As adults, our mental processes become fixed and ossified after we learn our mother tongue and grow beyond the age of childhood, and therefore we have to objectively and consciously learn and practice the paradigm. All right, so let's go back to the first word of the text. The tav at the end of Bereshit, okay, Bereshit, here's the text right here, and its current state. I also have it on the screen. Okay, so that's Bereshit, okay, the accent on the second syllable. All right, I lost my place in the text here. There we go. Oh, okay, so the tav at the end of Bereshit marks it for feminine gender. This word is a special case of construct ending. The hirik yod, okay, so that's the little dot-like vowel under the sheen, and the yud is between the sheen and the tav. Okay, it marks it for feminine. Okay, so that's, all right, getting mixed up here. Wrong part of the sentence. The hirik yod before the tav is a remnant of the Old Semitic genitive case ending. Okay, so it is not mandatory to use these case endings in colloquial Biblical Hebrew. In a more general, formal rendition of the language, all nouns are marked by case. The E sound for the genitive or construct case, the ah sound for the accusative case, and the u sound for the nominative case. So that's your marking your noun, your objects of your verbs, and your possessives. Okay, so those are case endings. We know this to be the case because written forms of cognate languages, okay, classical Arabic and Akkadian, have such case endings. Biblical Hebrew did not lack them, but unlike other written sources from the archaeological record that tended to preserve poetic and diplomatic genres, Biblical Hebrew is written in everyday colloquial. So the case endings exist, but they are not generally used. They only pop up on occasion. The same is true of Arabic. Colloquial Arabic does not use the case endings much. Classical Arabic does. It would be a tedious feature to append "u" to every noun used as a subject when colloquial Hebrew accomplishes the same thing by word order and context. Okay, let's see. The colloquial solution for the accusative case is the Hebrew word et, which I'm going to come to next. But a few remarks on the genitive case are in order. We have the noun Yisrael, and then we have the gentilic version Yisraeli. Okay, so this has a case ending for the genitive, e. Okay, so literally of Israel, or pertaining to Israel. So a Yisraeli is someone of Israel. Next page. The accusative case, they said, is seen with the directive hey. For instance, Shamayima, okay, to the heavens. Okay, so that's the accusative of the indirect object, all right? So this still exists in Biblical Hebrew also. So then since Bereshit has the genitive ending built in with the feminine, I have not needed to put an angled bracket after it. It is normally a construct. Okay, and actually I would call it possibly archaic or irregular ending. All right, I have given you a lot of new material. Okay, so don't worry about remembering it all. It is all expressed in the Hebrew text and the English below it. Okay, so we're just telling you how to connect the features up here. The English words themselves encode the grammar. Okay. Usually without having to rely on the symbols at all. Okay. But having listened to this, you will have a better comprehension of the justification for the way it's been translated in English. Okay, so now we come to the word eight. Okay, so I put that up in the screen here. Okay. This word in Hebrew comes before the objects of verbs. For example, he hit me. In English, we have three forms of the first person word: I, me, and my, which are I for the subject case, me for the accusative case, and my for the genitive case. Now, I know that English generally doesn't have case endings anymore, but it is preserved in a few words and the way they are used. And this threesome of a word here is one of those cases where the case form of the words have a case form. Okay, it's a different form of the word for different grammatical function. They all mean the first person. Okay, so me is for the accusative and my for the genitive, or we may call my the construct case. So he, subject, hit, action, me, meaning the action was performed by he on me. Okay, the Hebrew particle et, Hebrew uses the particle et, or eight, to mark words in the me position, to indicate where the action of the verb is being performed. All right. Valerie, do you want to bring me a glass of water, please? I don't want to shut this off again. Alrighty. Okay, so the next point. Alright, so while Barreau I told you my pronunciation isn't all that stellar, but I do know that we could trill the R, we can flap the R, or we can put it farther back in the throat, depending on which version of the resh you like. Okay, Barreau still has the verbal property that transfers to the objects marked by et, the heavens and the earth. So the action possessed by the Almighty is performed on its objects, the heavens and the earth. Notice that the action is qualified by in the beginning of. Thank you. All right, the action is qualified by the words in the beginning of. So it is not the full completion of the action, but the beginning of it. We call this modification of the verb an adverbial phrase. Okay, this is a word or phrase like an adjective that modifies a verb. Okay, so our particle comes in two varieties. Okay, et and ate. Okay, it has a diminished accent and is always connected to the next word with a makif. Ate has a longer tsere vowel and receives the main accent. It is nearly impossible to discover the reason for the difference in the grammar books beyond a difference of accent, i.e. the observation of the difference. I had occasion to listen to a Hebrew teacher explain that the long vowels in certain words at the end of phrases in Ecclesiastes 1 were caused by the presence of a siluk accent. Okay, so that near the end of the verse, before the verse ender, you have a little vertical bar that looks like a meteg. That's the siluk accent. Okay. But the teacher did not explain in his video why the siluk should have such an effect of making the vowel longer. The reason for not explaining this, I suspect, lies in the intuitive fact that such features may be added to the text at the whim of the scribe and are not really, for sure, the way the writer meant to express the matter. The siluk did not cause the vowels to get longer, but rather the vowels are longer because the reader will emphasize the word at the end of the clause. We call this style pause, okay, or impause. Also, it is not entirely clear whether pausal spellings were meant to punctuate the text, which would make them equivalent to periods and semicolons, or whether they are meant to lengthen the final word of a clause for emphasis or dramatic reading, or perhaps it is both. Pause readings really get out of hand when the masculine pronoun ha begins to look like the feminine pronoun ah. Pause readings also work havoc on trying to learn the regular paradigm of vowelling for nouns and verbs. This makes it devilishly hard for learners who do not know the language already. Pause readings can also involve the mere shift of an accent from one syllable to the next. Often, an ultima accent is thrown back to the penult. Okay, so ultima means the last syllable of a word, and penult means the second to the last syllable of a word, respectively. As we shall also see eventually, pause readings interfere with the regular verb paradigm of the perfect and imperfect, and also proper accent value. The reason they do is because certain features of the verb were long lost by the time the Masoretes got around to the pause system between the 7th and 9th centuries AD. I will not explain these features yet, but I will mention that I've done a little bit of research on when the cannellation marks and the vowel points were added to the text. And the 7th century is at the earliest it could be. But I did listen to a video by Michael Heiser recently, where he mentioned that it was the 8th century for the vowels. So this would push the pausal and cantillation phase of the markings to an even later date than the 8th century. Perhaps it was the 9th century, and probably the system originated with one person after all the pieces fell into place at a rather late date. Okay, next page. So, is et versus 8 part of the pause system? That's the question we face. As a policy, I have removed all the pause readings and replaced them with the regular vowels of the paradigm for the words in question. If one is interested in what the pause reading is, then one can consult the Masoretic text and start looking for the differences with my text, where the Masoretic text has a suluk, okay, or an atnach accent mark, which serve as sentence enders and semicolons in the punctuation of Hebrew sentences. So if you want to know where to find atnach, you would look for a comma in my text, and a suluk, you would look for a period. Okay, so, yeah. All right, so et versus 8 may be a part of the pause system, maybe. But in this case of the particle, keeping it does not interfere with either pedagogy or the verb system. So I'm going to keep it. Pause is not necessarily wrong in the case of making a vowel longer or shifting an accent, so long as it isn't done in contradiction to the meaning. As we will see, accents play a huge role in the meaning of the text. We have already seen a glimpse of this with the reduced accent on baro, and joining it closely to Elohim. Okay, and it gives the construct form of the infinitive construct. Of course, that infinitive construct is the name of the verbal form, but it can be translated as a noun with an of value, or it can be translated with a simple infinitive value, like just create, okay, without the ing on the end. All right, so if one does a word study on et versus 8, one will soon discover that 8 is used more emphatically to call special attention to the object of the verb. It may be considered a form of pause. Now, normally I would simply mark this particle with a colon, and you can see the colon in the text there. Okay, so that's the symbol for the untranslated et, okay, which we call the mark of the accusative or the direct, definite direct object marker. Okay, the colon shows in the English text that it has no word value in English. So that doesn't mean that it has no value in English, however. This is because English indicates the object of verbs purely by word order. If the word order of the Hebrew did not agree with the English word order, then I would have to use numbering marks on the English words to put them into English order so that the objects of the verbs would be in the right place. In this case, the object is already in the right place in Hebrew for English. Okay, just to show you that the transference of the mark of the accusative in Hebrew is made by word order in English. Okay, so whereas Hebrew, you can rearrange the sentence, and the mark of the accusative, et, will mark where the objects of the verbs lie. Okay, so let's see, what did I say here? Yeah. Oh, just an aside here. Et is far more commonly used than 8. Okay, so 8 would be your emphatic form, and et would be your ordinary object marker. To convey the more emphatic nature of eight over et, I have glossed the English word of. So as you can see in the interlinear here, in the beginning of the creating by the Almighties of the heavens. Okay, I've added a little more emphasis by putting the word of. And the second, eight hashamayim, and the eight haaretz. Okay, so on the second, the eight, I have glossed that, and as well as, or as well as, because and is a separate word, they're just joined together. Okay, I suggest that the difference between eight and et is a possible feature of the original Hebrew, since no doubt one could emphasize or not emphasize something in the way one accented or pronounced a word. However, such emphasis has absolutely nothing to do with the structure of the sentence, the way it is already accented, or the grammar. Such a feature is purely at the whim of the speaker, the original speaker, based upon gaining some intuition, or the reader, gaining some intuition from the context that something indeed should be emphasized. To put it another way, an original speaker for which the text is recorded spoke the words only one way. Maybe they emphasized, maybe they didn't. But the reader who comes along later may read the text in more than one way, depending on what he wants to emphasize. With such in mind, I have changed a few of the ets to eights. I did so later in this chapter with the creation of man. Man's creation is at least on par. We're going to reach the 20-minute mark, and we're going to pause this video again. All right. Continuation. All righty, we were at we read that. Okay, we read that. All right, with such in mind, I have changed a few of the ets to eights. I did so later in this chapter with the creation of man. Man's creation is at least on par with that of the heavens and the earth, and is worthy of emphasis. The key point, of course, is that the student realize the real reason why things are put the way they are, and not some fake form of circular reasoning, such as saying it is eight because the accent of the accent, and et because of the makef, with no reason being supplied why it is makef or not. And such is the problem with mere tradition. When the reason for a feature is questioned or inquired about, the answer is invariably a restatement of the same tradition in other words that sounds like a real answer, but isn't. I have put the final two words of the first stanza up on the screen. Okay, that is what I call each of the set of lines of text, stanzas. I will save the discussion of these words for a future video. And we're speaking of mainly Hashemayim and the Wav conjunctive here in Wa'et. Okay? So, progress on the printed text. So, give me a little update on what's going on here. Progress on the printed text stands right now on chapter 24. That is with the accent marks. The English translation is completed to chapter 50. The whole process has gone through multiple iterations, mostly in order to get as good a correspondence between the Hebrew and the English as possible, and also for pedagogical reasons, to make things as transparent and as unconfusing as possible. Okay, the whole process has gone through multiple iterations for pedantic reasons and research reasons. To all who have sent donations, I thank you very much. These help a lot. There is a donation link for PayPal on my contact page on worldwide www.torahtimes.org. Also, all my books are on the order page on the website. I prefer to do bulk orders, which take more time for you to get, but save dollars. But if you wish for speed and only one book, then I advise to use Amazon. I'm sorry, but I don't do international orders except to Canada. I have the ebooks. There are print facilities in the UK and AU, and hopefully the third-party sellers keep the books available. Otherwise, there is an ebook edition of all my books. I wish I could overcome these problems, but for now, I'm simply not big enough to do that without creating more problems than I can handle. Thank you for listening. Dan Gregg, over and out.